Welcome to News Briefs. Today is May 5th, 2025.
We've got a really varied mix of reports and articles you sent in.
Yeah, a lot to cover. We're going to dive straight into the key takeaways, looking at everything from potential shifts in U.S. policy, the economy,
To sports updates, medical news, and, well, a bit beyond that too.
Our goal is basically to make sense of what's important, maybe uncover some things you didn't expect.
Absolutely. It's a broad landscape. We'll explore, the potential economic impact of new initiatives, global migration patterns.
Catch up on sports, entertainment, some important health findings.
Right. And we'll also take a moment for a significant event from this date in history.
Okay, let's kick off with U.S. politics and policy. There's been quite a bit of talk around President Trump's recent comments on the Constitution and due process.
Yeah, specifically when asked if it applies to everyone in the U.S., including immigrants. He seemed, uncertain.
And his reasoning.
He mentioned the logistics, the sheer volume of potential deportation trials, though he also said his admin would follow Supreme Court rulings.
It brings up that whole tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between legal ideals and practical enforcement.
Exactly. And the reactions were pretty strong.
Senator Rand Paul, for instance.
Didn't hold back. Called the comments the most anti-American thing there is. Pretty direct.
Very direct. But then you had others, like Mike Pence and Adam Schiff.
Quickly jumping in to reaffirm the Constitution's importance, Pence apparently mentioned it repeatedly at an awards ceremony.
So it highlights this ongoing debate, really.
Mm-hmm.
Executive power in immigration versus constitutional rights for everyone here.
Mm-hmm. Pence's emphasis, even outside that direct context, shows how central the Constitution is to this discussion.
Okay, next up, Alcatraz.
Yeah.
President Trump ordered it reopened and expanded.
That's the plan, to house the most ruthless and violent criminals. He called it a symbol of law, order, and justice.
Seems driven by frustration with judges on deportations based on his comments.
It seems so, but, the history of Alcatraz is key here.
It closed back in 1963, right?
Yeah, mainly because it was incredibly expensive to run, being on an island.
And now it's a national park. So the practicality, the cost.
Big questions there. Nancy Pelosi called the idea not serious, which probably reflects that skepticism.
Though the Bureau of Prisons just said they'd comply. Not much detail there.
No, not really. Just a statement of compliance. We'll see how feasible it actually is.
Okay, another big policy move. A 100% tariff on all foreign-produced films imported for showing here.
Yeah, that's a huge number. The argument is that the U.S. film industry is dying and needs protection against a, quote, concerted effort of other nations posing a national security threat.
The stated goal is bringing production back to the U.S.
But the tricky part is, what counts as foreign produced? Film production is so global now.
Right. Lots of international collaboration. It gets messy trying to define that and then value it for a tariff.
Exactly. And the Motion Picture Association hasn't commented yet, which suggests they're probably scrambling to figure out the implications.
Governor Newsom in California, though, he reacted quickly.
He did. Called it a baseless and legally impossible stunt and economic malpractice. Strong words.
And there are real worries about runaway production, U.S. films shot elsewhere, and maybe retaliatory tariffs.
That's a major concern if big markets like China or India hit back with their own tariffs on U.S. films.
It could really undermine the whole point, couldn't it? And hurt the industry more broadly.
Precisely. We even saw stocks for Disney and Netflix dip a bit after the announcement.
Okay, shifting focus slightly. Social policy. HUD Housing and Urban Development reverse protections for transgender individuals in federally funded homeless shelters.
Yes, they revoked the 2016 Equal Access Rule, and they cited biblical scripture as part of the justification.
And they've also paused investigations into gender identity discrimination. Staff layoffs, too.
That's right. It seems to align with President Trump's executive order on restoring biological truth.
It's a significant policy shift, moving away from those non-discrimination protections in housing.
Definitely. And it connects to things happening at the state level, too, like that Utah law about university dorms based on sex assigned at birth shows a broader trend.
Okay, quick hits on other political news. A bipartisan Senate plan to lower drug costs.
Which is interesting, seeing some cross-party work there.
But also issues with a Senate crypto bill.
Yeah, highlighting ongoing divisions elsewhere.
European leaders, von der Leyen and Macron, criticized Trump's stance towards universities.
Signaling some international friction.
George Simeon leading in the first round of Romanian presidential elections.
Notable development there.
And Kristi Noem's first 100 days as Homeland Security Secretary focused on border security.
As expected, perhaps.
And finally, President Trump defended his idea for a big military parade on Flag Day his birthday, for the Army's 250th anniversary,
Right, dismissing the $45 million estimated cost as a pittance.
emphasizing showing off missiles, tanks.
Yeah, a particular vision of showcasing military strength.
All right, let's turn to the U.S. economy now. Deloitte's Q1 2025 forecast. What's the headline?
Headline is, strong economy right now, good consumer spending, high business investment, but significant uncertainty ahead.
Because of potential policy changes from the new administration.
Exactly. Deloitte looked at different scenarios based on what might happen with policy.
What's their baseline scenario assume?
Okay, baseline assumes extending the TCJA tax cuts, lower corporate tax for U.S. producers, continued deregulation, new tariffs. They modeled like a 5 percentage point average increase.
Okay.
Some spending cuts, about $200 billion annually, and about a 15% increase in deportations compared to the last 5 years.
And the economic impact under that baseline.
They see trade activity spiking initially, then slowing down.
Yeah.
Moderate GDP growth overall, 2.6% this year, 2.1% next year, and limited Fed rate cuts.
But they looked at alternatives too, right?
Yeah.
What if tariffs stayed at 2024 levels?
Interestingly, that scenario projects stronger GDP growth, 2.9% this year, 3.2% next year, lower inflation, and stronger consumer spending from 2026 on.
So lower tariffs, better growth in that model.
Seems so. And then there's a third scenario. Trade wars and persistent inflation.
Sounds ominous.
Yeah, it models a bigger tariff hike, 10 percentage points larger spending cuts, but still with the tax cuts. The result is much slower growth, 2.2% this year, only 1.3% next year, and delayed Fed rate cuts.
Really highlights how much these policy choices could matter for the economy.
Absolutely. It underscores the potential impact of the levers the administration is considering.
What about consumers? Spending was strong late last year.
Yeah, Q4 2024 was strong, but confidence dipped early this year, probably due to tariff fears and inflation expectations rising. Deloitte still sees spending growing this year, but slowing down next year.
And housing.
Housing starts fell early this year, high mortgage rates, but they expect a recovery later. Business investment is predicted to rise, especially next year if uncertainty eases.
Foreign trade sounds like the big question mark.
Definitely. Very uncertain because tariff details keep changing. Deloitte expects a significant impact, bigger than the last administration's tariffs, leading to pretty limited growth in exports and imports.
Any other government policy bits in the forecast?
Yeah, the new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
DOGE, okay.
Lots of federal employees taking buyouts, potential layoffs, downsizing agencies like USA. They assume about $200 billion a year in net spending cuts.
What about the deficit in financial markets?
Deficit expected to rise slightly this year as a percentage of GDP, then fall. They see the 10-year bond rate falling gradually. Markets have been volatile since the inauguration. S&P 500 down slightly. Dollar weakened a bit. Likely reflecting all this policy uncertainty.
And inflation. Still sticky.
Seems so. CPI inflation ticked up again to 3% year-on-year in January. Consumer expectations for future inflation are rising too. Deloitte thinks CPI inflation will stay stubbornly high this year, around 2.8%.
Okay, quite a complex economic picture. Let's shift now to global migration. The ICMPD migration outlook for 2025. What are the key drivers?
Still largely state fragility and violent conflict, according to ICMPD. That's pushing displacement numbers up.
And those numbers are huge, right?
Record highs. Estimated 122.6 million forcibly displaced by mid-2024, and the trend looks set to continue.
What specific situations do they highlight? Ukraine.
Ukraine's a big one. Depending on how the war goes, you could see anywhere from, say, 1.2 to 2.1 million Ukrainians returning if there's a stalemate, to potentially over 10 million displaced if Russia achieves full occupation. Huge range.
Wow. And Afghanistan.
Significant expulsions from Pakistan and Iran recently. That's led to a big spike in undocumented returns to Afghanistan, and likely means more people trying to leave heading towards Turkey and the EU.
But you mentioned EU arrivals from Afghanistan actually decreased last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. Despite the expulsions, fewer Afghans were apprehended at EU borders or applied for asylum in 2024, likely due to a mix of factors: tighter border controls, migration deals.
What about Syria?
Still very volatile. Violence, instability makes migration patterns hard to predict. Large-scale returns seem unlikely this year. Syrians still made up the highest number of EU asylum applicants in 2024, but the overall number did drop compared to 2023.
And Libya as a transit route.
Still key, yeah. Lots of migrants from Sudan, Niger, Egypt, other places passing through. But there was a significant drop in crossings on the central Mediterranean route in 2024.
Why the drop there?
Probably a combination of things. Better border security, efforts against smuggling networks, maybe those EU deals with North African countries having an effect.
What about migration within Africa itself?
Displacement numbers in Africa continue to rise last year, 13th year in a row. Major crises in Sudan, DRC, Somalia, others. But there's also substantial labor migration within Africa and to Europe and the Gulf.
And Latin America. They expect a decrease in displaced people.
For the first time in over a decade, yes. Largely attributed to tighter restrictions in transit countries and the U.S.
But a potential downside.
Yeah, the report raises concerns that a more restrictive U.S. policy under a potential second Trump term could lead to many more migrants getting stuck in transit in South America.
And potentially more heading towards Europe instead.
That's the prediction. They expect asylum applications from Latin Americans in the EU to actually increase this year, going against the general trend.
So, a potential second Trump administration could really shift global flows and strengthen calls for tighter policies in Europe.
That's a key implication ICMPD points out, and the EU is likely to keep focusing on its external dimension deals with neighboring countries for migration control.
The report also touches on hypothetical scenarios, like the fall of Assad in Syria.
Briefly, yeah. And the complexities that would create for refugee returns. Also, the ongoing war in Ukraine, urging European governments to plan for different outcomes, including long-term integration of refugees.
Okay, let's switch gears completely. Sports. Formula One rule changes for 2025.
7 main ones. First off, they're getting rid of the point for the fastest lap.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think?
Maybe to discourage those late race gambles just for 1 point. Focus more on the overall race strategy, perhaps.
Makes sense. What else?
Driver cooling systems become mandatory when a heat hazard is declared. And the minimum car weight goes up in those situations too. Clearly about driver safety in hot weather.
Good move.
Also, tighter limits on testing older cars. TPC cars and rookies have to do more FP1 sessions. 2 per car per season now.
More track time for the rookies, less testing overall.
Seems to be the idea. Plus, stricter rules on DRS and rear wings, more checks on flexibility.
Trying to keep the competition close. Prevent teams finding loopholes.
Exactly. And they clarified qualifying rules if multiple drivers don't set a time. Finally, the Abu Dhabi end-of-season test will now include a mule car for testing the 2026 tires.
Getting ready for the big 2026 regulation changes?
Yep, planning ahead.
Okay, moving to MLS soccer. Match day 11. Lots of teams doing well in the East.
Yeah, a record number averaging at least 2 points per game. Very competitive start.
And Sporting Kansas City won without a shot.
Bizarre, right?
Yeah.
1-0 over LA Galaxy thanks to an own goal. Didn't even register their own shot.
Only in soccer. Any standout players?
Christian Espinoza for San Jose. 2 goals, 1 assist, game winner. Earthquakes are leading the league in goals scored.
Nice. Chicago Fire started a really young player.
Yeah, Christopher Cupps, 16 years old, their youngest ever starter.
Wow. Other highlights?
Seattle won. Coach Schmetzer tied for 10th most wins all time. New England's won 4 straight. DC United scored twice in stoppage time to win.
Dramatic finish there.
Vancouver Whitecaps are still flying, top of the Supporters' Shield standings, and they're in the CONCACAF Champions Cup final. San Diego FC won 5-0. Chucky Lozano got 2. Philly Union have their best ever start under their new coach.
Lots of teams hitting their stride.
Yeah, and some great goalkeeping 2 shutouts for Dane St. Clair at Minnesota and Pedro Galese at Orlando. Columbus Crew are top of the East after their win.
Sounds like a really exciting season so far.
Definitely.
Quick NBA note, Buddy Hield.
Oh yeah, Golden State Warriors tied a record with 9 3-pointers in a Game 7 win over Houston.
Incredible shooting in a clutch game.
Absolutely phenomenal performance.
All right, let's shift to science and medicine. First up, CT scans and cancer risk.
Yeah, there's a projection that radiation from CT scans might be linked to maybe 5% of new cancer diagnoses each year.
Wow, 5%. That's significant.
It is. It really highlights the need to be careful about when we use CT scans, weigh the benefits and risks, and use the lowest possible radiation dose.
Definitely. On a more positive note, a drug for flu prevention.
Baloxavir. A study found just a single oral dose significantly cuts down virus transmission among close contacts.
That's great news for controlling outbreaks.
Yeah, especially useful in households or similar settings.
And AI is making waves in breast cancer screening.
It seems so. AI-supported mammography screening looks like it can increase detection rates and reduce the workload for radiologists.
Without increasing false positives.
That's the key finding, yeah. More detection, less work, same accuracy on false positives. Potentially a big improvement.
Interesting. Also, a link between a skin condition and ADHD.
Atopic dermatitis, yeah. Eczema. Research shows a significant two-way relationship with ADHD. It's more pronounced in patients with severe skin issues, allergies, sleep problems.
So doctors might need to think about both conditions together.
Exactly. An integrated approach seems important, especially for those more severe cases. The body systems are all connected, right?
True. What else is new in medicine?
Well, the WHO issued another urgent call about antimicrobial resistance, updated their list of priority bacteria we need new treatments for.
Still a major threat then.
Absolutely. And for H. pylori infections, the stomach bug, a new drug called tegoprazan, looks promising. Higher eradication rates than standard PPIs like esomeprazole, similar safety.
Okay. And Alzheimer's research.
A new blood biomarker, plasma EMTBR tau 243, could help with diagnosis and tracking treatment response. Might be an alternative to expensive tau PET scans.
A blood test would be much easier.
Definitely. Also, some research suggests specific probiotics, bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, might help reduce fever duration in kids with respiratory infections as an add-on therapy. Safely, too.
Lots happening. Any quick research bites?
Yeah, a whole bunch. Increased suicide attempt risk linked to atopic dermatitis. Higher riboflavin intake may be linked to lower psoriasis risk. Distinct brain changes seen in long-term sleep disorders. Triple therapy showing promise for uncontrolled asthma.
Keep going.
Okay. A study linked higher fluoride exposure to lower IQ in kids, though, with moderate confidence, and levels were above U.S. recommendations, no effect seen on adult cognition. Semaglutide might reverse some signs of liver disease, modified gut bacteria used to detoxify mercury, early success with gene therapy for GI cancers.
Gene therapy, wow.
Yeah. Also, links between good gut bacteria and rheumatoid arthritis, a new hair-like device for monitoring brain activity, discovery of an inflammatory enzyme in Parkinson's, a brain interface decoding speech in an ALS patient, new ideas for HIV vaccines focusing on antibodies that recognize lipids, sex differences in placental gene expression, whooping cough vaccine in pregnancy boosting babies' antibodies, and AI continuing to improve medical resources.
That's a lot. Just shows the incredible pace of research.
It really does, across so many different fields. And the nuances are important, like with that fluoride study needs careful interpretation.
How does this research get reported? Any news on that?
Yeah, a study looked at citation patterns. U.S. papers tend to cite U.S. journals like NEJM and JAMA. British papers cite British ones like BMJ and The Lancet.
Makes sense, I guess.
And outside the U.S. and U.K., The Lancet gets cited the most. Shows how information spreads, maybe some national biases.
Interesting. Any general health news or awareness days?
Well, there's discussion about scientific impacts after 2 cities stopped water fluoridation. Talk about whether altered biological clocks might be worse than just lack of sleep. And today, May 5th, is Melanoma Monday, Sleep Apnea Awareness Day, and World Hand Hygiene Day.
Important reminders. And something about COVID-19.
Yeah, a significant anniversary. It was May 5th, 2023, that the WHO declared the end of COVID-19 as a global health emergency.
A year ago already.
Yeah. And a later WHO study estimated around 15 million excess deaths globally during the pandemic, a stark reminder of the impact.
Okay, let's move to film and music. That film tariff is still the big topic.
Oh yeah, dominating discussions, lots of concern in the industry.
We're also hearing reports about Kevin Feige at Marvel.
Right, apparently expressing some internal concern that the MCU might be feeling more like homework than entertainment to audiences now.
Interesting times for the big franchises. Any new projects announced?
James Cameron is apparently developing a film about Hiroshima survivors called Ghosts of Hiroshima.
Wow, powerful subject.
Chloe Sevigny said she's interested in doing another American Psycho film, maybe with Luca Guadagnino directing.
Okay. And Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock are teaming up again.
For a romantic thriller, yeah. For Amazon MGM, that could be fun.
Definitely. Anything else? Video games. Box office.
The big news in gaming is Grand Theft Auto VI got delayed, now aiming for May 2026.
Oof, long way for fans.
Yeah. And at the box office this past weekend, Thunderbolts was #1, followed by Sinners, a Minecraft movie, The Accountant 2, and Until Dawn.
Got it. Now, some other news. Unfortunately, tragic news out of Arizona.
Yes, sadly. A mass shooting in Glendale, Arizona, at a restaurant called El Camarón Gigante Mariscos and Steakhouse during a Cinco de Mayo celebration.
Horrible. How many casualties?
Reports say 3 people were killed and 5 injured. Police suspect multiple shooters and have detained several people for questioning. Just awful.
Truly awful. And finally, today is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Any specific historical event we should mention?
Absolutely. Today commemorates the Battle of Puebla, which took place on May 5th, 1862.
That's the origin of Cinco de Mayo, right?
Exactly. It was a significant victory for the Mexican army against the French forces during the French intervention in Mexico. A real underdog story.
A reminder of the history behind the celebration.
Definitely puts things in perspective, especially given the sad news from Arizona today.
Okay, that brings us towards the end of our brief look into some of these key developments. It covers, well, a lot of ground.
It really does. From U.S. policy shifts and economic forecasts
To global migration, medical breakthroughs, sports, entertainment. It's clear there are many forces shaping things right now.
constantly evolving. We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable insights, maybe sparked a few thoughts.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.